Welcome to the Longevity CEO podcast, where we dive into the science of living healthier, longer lives, share real-time stories of resilience, and discover actionable strategies to help you lead with impact and purpose. Because being the CEO of your health and longevity starts today. Welcome to the Longevity CEO. I am your host, Greg Schindler. Today's guest is Andy Price. This is going to prove to be a fascinating interview and conversation. I feel like it's going to be a lot more conversation with Andy. I can't wait for you guys to meet Andy and learn a lot more about him, his life, his passions. I don't think there's anything off topic or off that we can't talk about in this conversation. Andy, welcome. How are you?
Thank you, sir. Great. Always great to see you. I really enjoy our conversations very much. Thank you.
The last conversation we had in Cabo, I feel was like a bromance started. At least that's how I felt it. I mean, I think we dug in for like an hour and a half, 2 hours just sitting there.
One like that.
It really did. It really did. So I want to talk first. Give me a little bit of Andy Price and the origin story, right? Where'd you grow up? We'll get into artisanal ventures and all of that, but you had some really interesting answers on the intake form that I would love to explore a little bit. But first, tell everybody who you are and where you come from and what you're all about.
Appreciate that. My dad I'm the son of a Marine Corps fighter pilot, had very, very high standards, decided that he didn't want to be raising his kids in crazy Marin County. So he moved us to a gentleman's farm up in Sonoma County. And I watched the world move in that area from agrarian cow to vineyard to the birth of the wine industry. It was fascinating. Really neat childhood in that regard. But it was pretty wild too. Having a Marine Corps fighter pilot for dad's not an easy run.
Siblings?
2, yeah. Oh, actually 3. 3, yeah. 2.5.
All right. Where do you fall in the pecking order of the siblings?
I'm the third son born of 4.
Okay. Wow. 4 boys.
Yeah. I have a half brother who's the oldest one, and then there are three of us from both parents. Yeah.
Shit, he needed to be a Marine Corps fighter pilot with 4 boys, growing up like that. How was that?
The family is my mom, who's still with us and putting up with all these crazy guys and all this masculinity and the total insanity. I think each one of us were probably in the ER 20 times before we graduated high school.
They used to tell me I was an accident looking for a place to happen.
Yeah. I mean,
broken bones, this collarbone twice, this one once, arms and legs, you name it, jumping out of trees, off of roofs, riding motorcycles, doing all the stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I was an only child. So my mom was, I can imagine with 4 boys, in and out of hospitals and ERs. And
it was pretty wild. I mean, she's 5 feet tall, 80 years old, still cranking, still sharp as a whip. By the way, the antithesis of what you and I think of as healthy lifestyle and still kicking. So if you look at the things you and I talked about, and a lot of people talk about with longevity and how it's nutrition, it's a holistic picture, right? It's fitness, nutrition, things like stem cells, and whatever medicinal aids there are, nutraceuticals, whatever your thing is, NAD. We could pick a topic. She eats Wonder Bread, nothing organic, smokes and drinks every single day. Is still sharp as a whip at age 80. She's turning 80 in a month.
I was talking about this the other day with a friend of mine, and one of our best friends is from Louisiana, South Louisiana. And if you've ever spent any time in South Louisiana, it's like some of the best food in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Not the healthiest food in the world, but by far some of the best. And his whole family, smoking, drinking, eating all the, Cajun food. And I think all of them have pushed 100, right? I mean, just, no longevity habits, if you will, just except enjoying life and not having any stress. And I think that's what we attributed it to. Was they just, if you've ever been to if you have any Cajun buddies, you go down there, everything, whether it's a birthday, a graduation, it doesn't matter. It all revolves around food, all of it. And they're always having a really good time, right? Very happy people, not a lot of stress.
Simple.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's a big part of it because we know stress is a killer. It is.
I got a buddy who you may have met in the Palmyra neighborhood who bought a haunted house down in New Orleans, and he's going to flip it for a fortune. I mean, that's a really interesting part of the country. And I think you just nailed something. It's like you look at the real stressor in life. It's like the inability to manage stress and cortisol in your system, and people don't realize what that's doing inside their bodies, whether they're worried about politics or money or wives or husbands or whatever, kids. They let that stress seep into them. And when you think about these people that live these kind of simpler lives with lower expectations of lifestyle and what have you, you kind of start to step back and say, there's merit to that value
Yeah,
system.
there is. And I heard and I'm getting a little bit out of my depth here, but I heard something or read something the other day where they were talking about how the body registers stress just like disease. It doesn't know the difference.
Yeah.
Right. So whether it's negative self-talk or stress about, the obvious things, romance, finance, whatever it may be, the body registers it just like it would a chronic disease. It doesn't. And so it feels it and processes it, if that's the right word, just like it would.
I mean, how many people do you know got cancer, and you just look at their attitudes in life? And I can't say this as I'm not medically trained and qualified to say this with any definitive confidence, but I do believe I know a number of people who died young and their attitudes were terrible. What they had in just their worldviews, what they lived with every day. I mean, you go back to the New Testament. I'm not a Bible thumping person at all, but even Jesus said it. It's like, you are what you think about, right? And so a lot of this has to do just with people and their internal struggles. Can you just contain that? How do you contain that? How do you cope with that? And so different, structure, different folks. I'm pretty amazed by the longevity of simple people who aren't doing anything about stem cells or any of this other stuff we worry about or we think about, or fitness routines or whatever, or nutrition. It's pretty amazing.
I agree. There's a lot of merit to keeping it simple. You mentioned you are what you think about. Have you read or heard of a book called Change Your Paradigm, Change Your Life by Bob Proctor?
Heard about it, have not read it.
It's a good read. And the paradigm is the way you view the world, basically, right? And so the idea is if you view the world negatively, you're going to have negative experiences. You're going to attract negativity. And if you view the world positively, you're going to attract positive experiences to you. And it's a really good read, and I highly recommend it to anyone struggling with the whole, you can have the same exact experience or situation with two different people seeing it completely differently. And once you're aware that you can change that paradigm in the way that you're viewing this, it opens doors. It can be miraculous for a lot of people. It's a great read. A great read. Change your paradigm, change your life.
Big believer in that. I mean, I wake up every single day with one thought. I'm going to go kick some ass today, and forget whether that's business or, surfing or whatever your sporting thing is, mountain bike, whatever you're skiing, doing something for your kids, your wife. It's like, I don't have this world like I'm getting out of bed worrying about the world or worrying about politics or Trump or Harris or whoever. Like, you just get up and you go, I'm lucky to be alive.
I'm going to go out and kick some ass today. And
wide open, beautiful world to go experience, and a lot of opportunity. I don't think I've had a day in my adult life, even my most dark days, I've never really had that default point of view.
I've always been the eternal optimist too. Didn't matter what, I was always that glass half full kind of guy. And, I saw something, it's like they say, well, let me get this straight. Everything's always worked out, but now it's different. No, it's going to work out, but especially the attitude and the mindset's a huge part of it. I know for me it is. Hey, can I tell you a quick story? You mentioned cancer, and, no matter, like, if you get cancer the way you think about it. So as a senior in high school, my grandmother got cancer, lung cancer. She smoked up until the day she went in the hospital. She was one of those women that could smoke and make it look like some of the movie actresses from the 50s and 60s, where it looked elegant and it looked cool. I mean, she was a very elegant lady, but she smoked.
That was exactly like my grandmother. Exactly.
Yeah, just they could pull it off. It was almost like, wow, how do you make
Martini
smoking
in one
look?
hand, cigarette in the other.
Yeah, it looks cool doing it. But she died when I was a senior in high school, and she had gone through chemo and radiation the whole bit, and it was pretty awful. My dad was, there. It was his mom by her bedside and all that through the whole thing. And a year later, I'm a freshman in college. He gets diagnosed with lung cancer. Now, here's the interesting part of this thing. he was a college athlete, high school athlete, was a baseball player, was a pitcher. Super fit, always took care of himself. He did smoke when he was younger. Guys in that generation, kind of did, but he quit smoking at 34 years of age. And he didn't get cancer until he was in his 50s. And he had watched what happened to my grandmother, and he's like, I'm not doing chemo. And the doctor's like, you have less than a 30% chance of surviving this if you don't do it. And he was a man of deep faith. Okay. He was a religious man. And he said, well, if it's my time, then it's my time, and I'm going to a better place. But you're not putting, his exact words, I was there. He said, you're not putting that shit in my body. And he had just watched what my grandmother went through. So he was like, I'm not doing that. So they take
delaying the inevitable most often, as you know.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, for sure. And so they take 2/3 of his right lung out. And I'm telling you, Andy, within 2 weeks or less, he's back in the office. And he never, he lived on. He wound up dying in 2010, October 7th. And he wound up taking his own life when he did that. But he beat cancer without any of that stuff. And he just said, if it's my time, it's my time. But his mindset, he woke up every day saying, it's not time for me to go yet. I haven't done everything I'm here to do. And he had that mindset, that strong, I'm going to get up, go out there, dominate this day. And whatever happens is going to happen.
Personal question.
Of course.
Why did he take his own life?
His health was failing and he didn't want to be a burden on the rest of us.
Total sense.
And he was a super competitive guy. He was a commercial real estate developer, had been very successful.
Wanted to go out on his own terms.
He did.
One of my best friend's father did exactly the same thing. He had early onset of Alzheimer's, went to the local sheriff's office, pulled out his 45 and ended his own life. And none of his children lamented that decision because it was his personal choice to go out that way versus let us be a ward to his children.
All right, so we'll go down this rabbit hole for a minute. I don't know if we talked about this before, but he was my adoptive father. He wound up, my mom married him. My biological father took his own life when I was 12. Now, he was the kind of alcoholic they make movies about, right? I mean, just a mean, tormented, demons running deep, and he just could never beat them. And so he wound up taking his own life at 12. And then my adoptive father, who wound up giving me his last name, and Dad 2.0 was, like a blessing, right? He was my guy. He was my best friend, my just everything. So two different guys, the exact same act in the exact same way, right? Both with a gun, but for completely different reasons, right? Completely different legacies. And so I have this perspective when people talk about, it's the most selfish act you can do because of all the collateral damage you leave behind, and the people that are hurt when you're gone. And I can see that, but I also have a different kind of perspective on it because I'm like, the day I found out about my biological father when I was 12, I was relieved. I wasn't sad. I was relieved. I was like, okay, all right. Of course, with my adoptive father, Jim, I was wrecked. I was wrecked when I found out. But it's an interesting perspective to have, that experience, A, happen to you twice in life, but B, to watch the completely different circumstances on the same act. And let's
I appreciate you going there because this is a fascinating topic. I lost my dad earlier this year, and he went through Alzheimer's for 6 years. And then I lost another friend who's a dear. He's like another father figure. He used to be the CFO of DeLorean. Fascinating guy with my neighbor. Amazing guy. He looked like Clint Eastwood until he was like 94. I mean, he was an incredible guy, specimen of a human. And the last few months of his life, he went from being like Clint Eastwood to looking like the guy from the cover art of the Iron Maiden albums. Remember Eddie?
Yeah.
And it was terrifying. And if you look at this death in America thing, you really want to talk about longevity, you have to look at the end game too, right? And I feel like the way we allow our elderly people to die, horrible. It's draconian. It's expensive. It's dark. It's way too drawn out. It's very emotionally disturbing. And if you look at the cliches around suicide, who the hell's business is it? The surviving people make it about them. That's kind of endemic, I believe, in our culture. Everything's about me. And the people that I know that are the best people don't ever take that position. They're like, there's nothing about me. I'm in servitude, or I've got other constituents, or I live to be a part of an ecosystem, and that ecosystem needs to be healthy. And it's really easy to take a cheap shot at somebody who decides to end their lives, when in reality, none of us have any idea what level of despair these people reach, or the calculus, or even the ultra pragmatic decision that you make to say, I don't want to be a ward to my kids. I don't want to go into a hospital and live like a zombie for 6 years, or whatever it is. I think you got to just look at them with empathy and, say, I'm sorry to lose you, and move on, because the mashing around and the judging of people that would reach the depth of that despair to make the decision to end their lives will never understand or comprehend that, because we're still alive and haven't committed suicide. So I take very deep offense to people that just flippantly say, oh, that's just a selfish act. One of my best friends growing up took his own life because he knew he had gone to a place in his own value system that he didn't know anymore. He went from a great guy to this militant, crazy person and wanting to join Idaho militias or whatever. And he was like the kindest person in the world. Next thing he knew, he was this angry militia kind of guy. And then he just decided one morning he had become something that he hated. And he said, I can't do this. And he took his life. He was maybe 25, 30. And so, you look at that and you can kind of say, well, if real empathy means truly trying to understand what that person's calculus was when they made that decision. I didn't expect to go here, by the way, in this conversation, but we could go on and on, because I've been seeing a lot of death this year and thinking about it that way, looking at just how disgusting that process is, whether it's sudden or whether it's drawn out, and the decisions that happen and the lack of control. It's really a bizarre dynamic.
I read a statistic where the average American spends the last 11 years, well, maybe not, but 11 years of their life with chronic age-related disease, to your point, right? We just sort of drag this thing out. And it's, there's a lot of stats that I think people would be shocked to hear. And one is 23 or 26 medications, the average number of medications that people go into a nursing home or assisted living center with, like a shoebox full of these medications that they've been on. And then apparently adverse drug reactions are the number one unreported cause of death in the U.S. Like, in other words, they say, well, it was old age, or it was a complication with a UTI, or it was something. But apparently they're adverse drug reactions. And if you think about it, it makes some sense, because you have a doctor who doesn't know this patient. They've got a couple of hundred new patients, probably cycling in new all the time on all these different meds. And there's no way they can be, caught up on, if this person gets a UTI and I prescribe them this, I got to go through and look at all 23 different medications that they're on and see if there could be a potential adverse drug reaction. But apparently and I want to say it's that, and I could get this wrong either, but maybe the 8th or the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. are adverse drug reactions. And a lot of them come in our senior citizens in that environment.
Doesn't surprise me at all. If you think about one of the this is bad for me to say this, because I got a lot of friends in the pharma and biotech industries, but I will say this: I believe very deeply that Western medicine is rooted in the worst forms of capitalism, even though I'm an uber capitalist myself. You look at the dynamics between the unholy relationships between the FDA, the drug manufacturers, distributors, doctors. You look at fentanyl crisis, you could pick a topic and you could just be like, well, even the most benign drugs, we really understand what they're doing to our bodies. We don't, because genomics is still too nascent as a category. So we don't understand the custom biochemistry inherent in our own bodies, such that if you inject some foreign molecule, large or small, you don't know what the hell havoc it's wreaking on your system. You think you might be treating a system, and you may be triggering a more systemic reaction that doesn't manifest for years. So that's why I try to just avoid medications of any kind as often as I can. Maybe once in a while, a little anti-inflammatory or something. You get injured, you try to take something for whatever. You do some Toradol, thing with an IV or whatever. But the aversion to Western medicine for me runs very deep. for exactly what
Yeah. You know, I think Bill Gates is the one who said the human body is the most complex operating system that's ever, you know, and certainly the thing we know the least about. Um, it's sick care. It's we want you to feel better, not get better. And you
Right.
feel better by masking the symptom with the pharmaceutical. And I'm with you 100%. I agree 1000%. I always pull back just a little to say there have been some incredible discoveries and advancements and
Absolutely.
life-saving techniques that have come out of biotech and big pharma for sure.
Absolutely.
Right?
Therapeutics have saved people I know. So I'm indebted 100%. This
100%.
is a personal choice I've made because I'm fearful of introducing foreign agents in my body whenever I can avoid it. I do. And by the way, the COVID vaccination, the Johnson & Johnson, which was deemed to be the most benign of the three major ones, almost killed my wife. I think I told you that story. She was
Yeah,
in the
you
ER
did.
thing the whole night. It was a nightmare. And she had an autoimmune disease triggered by that she's only now sort of recovering from. So just as an example, these are very personal experiences that people and personal. It's like the discussion around suicide. It's a very personal decision people have to make around their own health. What works for them, what they theorize is working for them or not working for them.
Yeah, and I think too we're we've been trusting. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, if the guy walked in a room, had a white lab coat on with his name in cursive writing over here and a stethoscope around his neck, and it said doctor, if he told me to jump on one leg and do turn in circles, I'd have done it
They
because
were gods. We thought
he
they were
was the
gods.
doctor.
We
Yeah,
thought they were gods. Yeah. And
and
they
I
thought
think
they were gods too.
especially the
I love
surgeons.
them.
Um, especially the surgeons. But no, I mean, and again, to no knock on these guys, but they go to medical school and they learn to diagnose and treat symptoms of disease, not the underlying root cause of disease itself. And that's part of the inherent problem with Western medicine and the Western medicine model,
Yeah.
which is just sick care. And I think that a lot of people are waking up now to this idea that we do need to have a more proactive, preventative kind of approach to medicine. It's like some of the treatments, that we do where take plasmapheresis as an example. It's an FDA approved procedure in the US, but you have to be sick in order to have it prescribed and or paid for by insurance. Like Guillain-Barré, for example, is one of the indications that would get you plasmapheresis. Why can't we do this in a healthy patient or in a healthy person who wants to try to be preventative? It makes sense. We want to remove, metabolic waste and viral particles and antibodies and things that have collected. I call it cleaning the dirty water out of the fish
Oh
tank.
yeah.
Um,
It's amazing. And when you said, you see it come out and you see it go into the receptacle and in the bag, like that shit's been living in my body for what? And it's terrifying.
yeah,
It's terrifying.
I
It's
mean,
like
it's yeah,
it's so cathartic to see it recycled out of you. I mean, the question I have for you is, how is Keith Richards doing this for the last like 50 years? What is
well,
he going out of? What is he going out of this country?
he gets full blood transfusions, I
Yeah.
think, right? I mean, just yeah. When he goes out of the country and um,
So that's an example of what is holding back the United States from a health perspective in my personal view. It's an example of the FDA's aversion to innovation, and I believe it's influenced heavily by the drug companies because
it
if
is.
you can't patent something, some process or some larger small molecule, for example, the aversion and all this FUD, if you Google stem cells, for example, or plasmapheresis, any of this stuff, you see a bunch of FUD on it.
Yep.
And the Google results are tailored. I don't want to speculate on who's tailoring those results or who's paying for the search engine optimization results of those queries, but I'm deeply skeptical because I have personal firsthand experience with these, what I would call modalities, non-traditional modalities. And I think it's criminal that the United States isn't spending, we're allowing bureaucrats who aren't even medically trained in many cases to stop access to things that we should be able to personally make a choice about our own bodies, our own health, and go access these medicines, or these let's say they're processors or whatever you want to call them. And we're a third world country in this regard in the United States. We really are.
I read the other day we're not even in the top 40 in the overall health of our citizens. And I think a few years ago we were like 37th in the world.
Yeah.
In the overall health of our citizens. And imagine how much money we spend compared to, I don't know, pick the top 5. Whatever, Japan's up there, I mean, we probably outspend the top 5 countries by orders of magnitude, and we're not even in the top 40 in the overall health of our citizens. That's what you need to know. And y'all can, somebody, if you're watching or listening, you can fact check this, but I think I heard or read that 78% or 73% of the FDA's budget is funded by clinical trials, right? Applications for clinical trials by drug companies and all that. And there you go. I mean, you
we
don't
have
have to.
high infant mortality rates because we have extremely sterile environments through which children are born, as you know. We have almost like a obsession with pills. If you go to a CVS or something, you have these little pill boxes and like these little stuffies. These are like little
Yeah.
stuffed animal kind of equivalents, but they're pills. It's almost like we're making fun, and we're kind of making fun of the fact that we're addicted to all these medicines. And you look around these pharmacies, and people are like nervously waiting in line for their meds, and it's really a bizarre. I mean, this is what is a top 2 pillar of the United States economy. I mean, it's really kind of dark if you think about it. Like,
It is.
why are we so overly drugged? It's fascinating.
Profit, money. I mean, and yeah, we can go on and on about that. But let me ask you a question. Were you always this conscientious about big pharma and health care and all of that? Did you grow up thinking this way?
I would say that my dad was a marathon runner. He was big on fitness. He was a big, he was a Cal track star kind of guy. I think he went full ride scholarship to college on, track. And when I was 15 or 16, I was a fitness trainer and just believed in fitness from day one. Some people around me have called me a manorexic, just because I was like so, such a crazy person about it. But I never really thought about it through medicine. I just tried to avoid medicine. I just always had this reptilian view of like, okay, well, I don't trust this as a pill. Yeah, but would I take Advil if I could bang myself up? Sure. And I've had surgery. I've had my shoulder rebuilt. I've had multiple surgery. I had a stab wound in my right wrist, and I had to have it surgically repaired. So I believe very deeply in certain components of the medical system for sure, and I'm very grateful for it. One of my best friends is a very senior executive at an extremely large biotech company. His great passion in life is solving diseases, be they orphan issues, orphan drugs, for example. I mean, things like that where small populations are suffering. I mean, so I think there's a lot of legitimacy around this ecosystem. To your point earlier, to tie up the question on me, I just always had this, I think it was maybe born aversion to outside medicines. I just really am deeply suspicious of them.
So let's talk about on the professional side, right? Part of what the whole purpose of this longevity CEO thing is, and I think I may have shared this with you, but if I didn't, I'll briefly do it. I keep knocking this table. I got called the longevity CEO for when, I built a place in Costa Rica and I used to speak, and one of my buddies introduced me that way. And I started thinking more and more about it. And I had this idea that we all should be thinking like the CEOs of our own health and longevity, right?
Wow.
Because, if you think about it, as CEOs, we have, you create a vision, and then you get a team and you put a team together and to help you execute or come up with a strategy, and you build a plan to execute that strategy. And then you look at KPIs or data points or metrics or whatever to see how well that plan and strategy are working. You optimize, tweak it, and scale. That's our jobs. Imagine we outsource that job as the CEO to a consultant. And then we talk to a couple of times a year, and only when there was a problem in the business. And instead of trying to come in and diagnose the systemic root cause of the issue in the business, they just said, here, do this. It's not going to fix it, but it'll make it kind of go away for a little while.
Yeah.
Right? The business is not going to, flourish, right? It's not going to succeed. Yeah, that's exactly what we do with our health, and we call that consultant a doctor. And so I introduced this concept, like, and imagine the CFO, CMO, COO of a business, CEO, they don't speak, right? They're isolated and they don't share information and knowledge. Again, the business is not going to do very well. And again, but that's what we do with our health. We outsource it. It's isolated. People aren't talking. And you don't have this vision, or a lot of people don't have this vision, and then try to put this plan together. And my theory or my suggestion is we have to start thinking that way. We have to start taking more agency and ownership over our health. And especially if you're going to try to live healthier longer. Because when I say the word longevity, that's a big, big word, right? Minsky called AI a suitcase word, artificial intelligence, because it just meant so much to so many people. I feel the same way about longevity. I think it's an economy, it's a science, it's a movement, it's a lifestyle. There's all these different things it can be. But at the end of the day, we're really trying to talk about living healthier and hopefully for longer, if that's your goal, right? And so when I come back to this whole idea of the longevity CEO, I'm a mind, body, spirit, science guy. That's how I think of it, right? Because I have to have this thing will spin some stories, brother, right? I mean, it can write some serious fiction. And then this thing feels the damage of it, right? And it keeps the score, which is another great book. The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, yeah, great book.
Great book. And so, and then of course there's, the spiritual component, right? Whatever that means to you. And it can mean God, it can mean the universe, it can mean nature. It doesn't matter. It's just the idea of being able to keep all those things in balance and then add this science component to it that's advancing at a really rapid rate right now. And I would argue for the betterment, if you will, of humanity. How do you find that balance? How do you, because I know you've been, and tell us a little bit about your business. You mentioned in the intake that one of the most vulnerable things you would talk about would be failing at business and in your personal life. But I also know that you've been wildly successful in business too. And anytime you're self-made and as successful as you've been, it feels like it comes at a sacrifice. You give up something to get something, right? And so I'm interested in the balance and sort of where you were, what you went through, and how you found it now.
I appreciate that. I think, so I was working 80 hours a week from the age of 20, right out of college, right up until about 7 or 8 years ago. I mean, 60, 70, Sunday nights, Saturday morning calls. And the only way I coped with it was hardcore athletics. Like I was a bike racer for a while, did an Ironman triathlon, climbed mountains, I'd go climb mountains and ski down them and do things like that. People would always ask me, why would you do that? And be like, to cope with myself, just to keep the train on the tracks. Yeah. And then also just to totally divert away from work. When you're so immersed in what you're trying to do, a lot of people said, what drove you? I was homeless for a little bit when I was younger. It was actually a really interesting experience. My dad thought I was a raging liberal because I didn't believe in certain things. I believed in gay rights and certain things. He was a hardcore right-winger, and I was like the liberal of our family. He went through a tough time. He was, generally speaking, I think he did it the best he could. And I love and respect my father. Even now, even more so now that he's gone. What I would say, though, is that I was very driven and very fearful of failure because of living on couches for a good 6 months. And then what happened was I called the track coach at Cal Poly and said, hey, here are my times. I was kind of a screw off in high school. I was a little bit of a rebellious kid. And I knew I was brighter than the average. I thought I was probably brighter than, I just wasn't normal. So I knew
you weren't living up to your potential.
Yeah, I knew I wasn't living up to my potential, but I was also struggling with a lot of just angst and anger and stuff like that. And then I just, decided to cry, snap one day, and I just put him on the ground. And the next thing I'm couch surfing for 6 months. And I'm like, okay, well, I was a pretty prolific runner. So I called the Cal Poly tracks coach and got into school on a scholarship, and the rest is history. So I think what's really the drivers for me are an innate competitiveness. My dad drilled that into us. Like, it's not okay to lose.
Right.
And it's like people nowadays, they say, oh, I'll get a blue ribbon for just showing up. I'm like, bullshit. That's not how the prices were raised. And honestly, I don't disagree with that. I think America's gone soft because people think that losing is okay. You don't have to hate yourself for losing, but you don't have to like it either. And it's like the idea of achieving and having the dopamine. I mean, there's so many people I've put a lot of young people launched their careers. They made 7 figures at a very young age. And that's actually, to me, as rewarding as any wealth I've ever generated for myself. It's like lifting other people up, bringing them along, and seeing them fly is really incredibly rewarding. And so, when you think about the drivers of life, there's some fear, right? There's some greed. There's everything in between. And then you have these transcendental story arcs in your mind that you're kind of driving towards, it's almost like a moth to the flame, right? I never thought I was going to be alive past the age of 30, first of all. And so what happens is at an early age, if you start tasting success, you start wanting more success. Basically, it's like the rat wanting the cocaine in the labyrinth, right? In the lab, you start saying, wait a second, I can actually do this. And then you start rolling and you start working harder, and then things start happening. You start gaining your confidence. And that's why I think people like us need to, reach down and bring these young people along and bring them up, lift them up, give them a chance to succeed, throw them a couple of touchdown passes. If they catch them, throw them a more touchdown pass. So I think some people did that for me early on in my life and really took me under their wings. And I have to say that a lot of the success has to do with, them. It's a total picture. But I will say that I was always paranoid of failure, and I don't regret any of that. People go, oh my God, you've been so traumatized. Why aren't you in therapy every day? Like therapy is, waves or spearfishing or whatever, spending time with my wife or my kids or my dogs or whatever, friends. But I do believe it's a system. You live within a system of your own construction. And how do you optimize that system? Health is obviously a major component of it. And maintain that health vigorously is a whole system. I hope that answers your question. I know it was a bit of a long-winded answer.
No, I think it's awesome. There's a lot of people out there that will disagree or take issue with the idea that, like participation trophies, showing up trophies and stuff. I tend to agree with you in that. Look, I mean, you look at guys like Michael Jordan. He was cut from the team and told him he wasn't going to make it and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And, it goes on, right? His innate drive to prove him wrong is what made him the GOAT, right? In terms of basketball. And I think, when it comes to our kids, right? So I have 3 sons. I have a daughter and 3 sons. My oldest was a musician, or is a musician. And he went to Berkeley and London College of Music. And he put a guitar in his hand, and everybody used to tell him how talented he was. And I used to tell him, I'm so proud of you because you worked so hard at it. Because this kid would spend 6-8 hours a day. And I used to tell him, if you're practicing 8 somewhere out there, there's a kid practicing 9, and maybe 10, and maybe 11. And so you would hear him playing that guitar and everybody go, oh my God, you're so talented. You're so talented. And I would drill into him, you work really hard at this. Right. And yeah, you probably have some talent, but it's the hard work that you put into this that made you so good. And my middle son decided he wanted to be a high school wrestler as a sophomore. Kids had been wrestling, maybe it was a junior. I don't know, but it was later than the other kids. And I said, look, wrestling's no joke, man. This is, it's legit. And these guys, it's hard work. You get out there. But I said, I'm super excited about it for you. So he goes out there and he starts training, starts working, he starts getting with the guys that are way better, and he loses the first couple of matches. Now, I was a Krav Maga guy, and I taught for a long time, and I trained them up in Krav Maga when they were kids, and they would be horsing around like kids do. And I told them, look, when we step on the mat, it's all business. 45 to 60 minutes, it's business. When we get off, we go back to playing and being brothers and, all that other kind of stuff. But these 45 to 60 minutes, it's all business because the stakes are really high. And so they kind of learned that a little bit. And I told him, when you step on that mat, it's you or him. It's all business. Put that back in your head. Remember this. And the kid trained, worked hard, lost his first 2 matches, and then started pinning kids in under a minute and going hard. And he was the last one in the gym every day. He would train with the kid that was, the number 1 wrestler on the team. So he would learn.
It's my guy right there.
Faster and all that. He went to regionals in his first year. And I said, I've never been more proud of you, not because of the accomplishment, but because of the mindset. And that you said, you know what, I want this, and I'm going to go put in the work, and I'm going to figure it out. And I think his mindset, because he's athletic, probably the most athletic of the 3, but it was his mindset of, I don't want to get beat again. I just don't.
One of the things Americans love, I do love this about our country, value system-wise. We all love the underdog that works her ass off, that makes it to the top against all odds. Who wants to hear the story about the kid that was born 6'4", perfect body, could do everything, dunk a basketball? Those guys are like, okay, fine. You were just born lucky. You won the universe's lottery, right? The genetic lottery. That's what you got. But it's like the people that you don't see coming, the people that grind and work and perfect something. My wife's a concert pianist. I don't know if I ever shared that with you.
Uh-uh.
And she was just like your son. I mean, she was working out, she was practicing the piano at 4:00, 5:00 in the morning every single day. Played at Carnegie Mellon, thousands of people. Decided that wasn't enough, so she went and had to become a world-class cellist. But just because everyone like
Underachievers.
yay, traveling soccer person, make me feel like a loser. And so she's that person where she would be like, I'm just going to pin it because I want to achieve excellence. And those people, to me, it's like, that's inspirational. The maniacal pursuit of excellence.
Yeah.
That's drives, honestly, if we cut to a 1 second thing, you're like, okay, well, what's driving, what do you attribute to your success? It is that. And it's still as strong in me at 54 as it was at 24.
Just not failing. You mentioned, though, you failed in business as one of the vulnerable things you would talk about on here. When did that? Tell me about that. What happened?
I was the CEO. I took over this company called SPMB, and I'm the P. My name's still on the door. And what happened was I took over this business from this guy who was an older guy, pretty well known in the industry, but just a very unassuming, humble guy. But he had a value system very different than mine. He didn't care about lifting other people up around him or growing business or being number one in the industry. He wasn't innately competitive. So he and I were like oil and water. And there was the him camp and the me camp. My camp was like, I would get you in a room in my office and I would tell you, it's Monday morning at 7:00 in the morning. We're going to do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and this by Wednesday. If you didn't do it, I was going to bust your ass. If we didn't do it by Friday, you might get fired. And there was this like maniacal group. Now, every single person in that office ended up being a multimillionaire. Some of them have become partners in major venture capital funds that are bigger hitters than I am now, industry wise. Like really, it's special, important people. And they didn't mind it. They liked it. And so what happened was I didn't sell why that mattered with enough humility as a CEO to bring people along. I was basically like, if you don't get my worldview, then fuck off. Like you don't belong in my field of view. And my other partners who owned a fair bit of the shares of the company didn't have that maniacal view of the world. They were like, we'll just give these people a little bit more time. I was like, a person who's a apologist, a second tier performer, a person who's mailing it in, doesn't really care, has no passion. You know who those people are. It's like, when you know. And I wasn't patient enough or humble enough to bring people along. So I really didn't deserve to lead. That was my main issue. If you can't bring people along your worldview or elegantly move them out, into a different, I always fired people in what I believe is a pretty elegant way. But the culture, I could not build a uniform culture where everybody believed in the same thing, which is we're going to do this in an incredibly bespoke, custom, passionate way. And so I had to leave the company. I did leave on my own wish. I fired myself. I basically took about a year and I told my partners, I said, you guys, I'm out because if we can't be number one, I don't want to be on the field. I'm going to go build something else completely from scratch. So I had to fail in order to have the freedom to go build the businesses I wanted to build in my own image. And I knew I did not belong in a large company. I knew I didn't belong managing lots of people. I knew what my own limitations were. I embraced them and decided I was going to go off and be an entrepreneur. Started 2 new companies, and they're doing extremely well. And I mean, they're outstripping my my wildest hopes and dreams, because I knew that I was deeply flawed, and so I didn't belong in this environment. I belonged in this environment, and so I got divorced and then changed my career basically in the same week. And everyone thought, well, is this guy falling apart? And I was like, nope, it's a midlife awakening. Not a midlife crisis. I don't believe that midlife crisis. I believe that it's like if you harness it the right way, it's an awakening. And you go, wait a second, I'm not going to accept the status quo. I'm not going to accept the slow, that old Shawshank Redemption statement. He said, it was Morgan Freeman said, get busy living or get busy dying, right? That's like kind of, I have his voice in my head all the time. Live now. Live it your way. Do it your way. Know what you are, and don't try to be something that you aren't. You can always try to aspire to be better than you are. Of course, that should be your first principle MO, right? But you don't have to force yourself to comply with other people's points of view or ways of operating, right? You got to optimize for yourself. It's kind of like, I love Nietzsche, and everybody thinks that if you like Nietzsche, you must be an Hitler apologist or something like that. It's so ridiculous. Like, all the guy basically said is, don't buy the whole bullshit about if you're a good person, then you're going to go see God and the pearly gates and all that stuff, right? I never bought that. I was like, live now, live like the Ubermensch, the overman. Like, that's what he was describing, is just optimizing yourself on planet Earth. I read about that at a very young age, and it left an impression on me. I really do believe very deeply in that. Optimize yourself for this life that you have, which may be taken from you like that.
What's driving you now? What's driving you today? You've been successful in business. What's beyond the business success?
What drives me now is the idea. Is funny because when I left my last company, I decided I want to be the dumbest guy in the room. I might have been the dumbest guy before. I just thought at the time I was the smartest guy. Probably wasn't the smartest guy. I'm pretty sure I was not the smartest guy, smartest person. I can name at least two people that I know are a lot smarter than I am, but I thought that I was the smartest guy in the room. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to make sure I'm the dumbest guy in the room. And I went to work for Red Point Ventures, which is a world-class venture fund, and then Index Ventures. And this one guy I work for, this guy, Mike Volpe, he's probably a polyglot. He's a fascinating guy. And I went to work for him and another guy named Scott over at Red Point, and learned a ton from them about venture capital. And I was like, if I work really hard for the next 10 years, I might be able to approach the success that these two people have had in this industry. And so it was the opportunity to learn. Then I've always been an insanely curious person. I was reading at books and books. I never went to sleep before 2:00 in the morning reading books. And I was like 5, 6 years old. And I couldn't inhale information fast enough. Still feel that way. Wake up every morning at 5:00 in the morning, read.
Yeah.
And inhale information. And so what drives me now is the ability to learn and apply those learnings. And the more complex your environment becomes, like I'm trying to do tech venture capital in a sea of over financings and crazy excess capital and lots of failure and lots of insanity around AI and cybersecurity and all these themes that people are talking about, reading about in the Wall Street Journal and talking about at cocktail parties. It's an extremely complex ecosystem in which I operate, and everybody else is a Harvard guy or a Stanford guy or whatever, better educated. Like my dad told me when I was younger, he's like, there's going to be a guy in every street corner who's better looking than you, smarter than you, stronger than you, faster than you, a better person. He's like, you will never be number one at anything. And that was the best advice. That was the best wisdom that everybody's ever passed on to me. It was like, you got to go grind to even be in that person's orbit. And so now what I'm trying to do is build something really unique in a very complex ecosystem dominated by extremely smart people that I believe are smarter than myself. So that's kind of pulling me along to, outwork them, out-hustle them, outthink them.
Is there anything different, any spin, any Andy Price sort of, innovative twist on the model that you do? I mean, and also the driving. So I get the competitiveness. Nobody listening to this is going to doubt that you're this fiercely competitive human. But you mentioned a couple of things, is doing this to help build people up, doing this to help create millionaires, multimillionaires, of people that you were able to nurture and bring along with you. Is that still a big driver? Is there still a lot of, yeah.
Here's why. And you go, okay, well, what do you get up really to do every day? That comes down to one thing. There's like one little voice on one of your shoulders, right? It's like, what is that? To me, creating businesses, I've only created 2. Okay. These entrepreneurs I get the opportunity to serve every day. These are really, really special people. A lot of them several of them are Israeli citizens that were trained in the IDF's 8200 cybersecurity unit. And I look at these people and I'm like, I will never be anywhere near as smart as you, but I'm going to do everything I can to help you build a gigantic company. Why? Well, they employ a lot of people in the United States. They solve a lot of problems. We're basically in World War III right now from many perspectives. If you think about conventional warfare, we're right on the edge. But cyber, we've been in World War III for like 10 years, maybe longer. And so if you think about this, it's like, what are we trying to do? We're trying to create a lot of jobs, create a lot of wealth, create big companies. And when you do that, even if you're a small catalyst in the gestational process of creating a really important company, what happens, that feeds society, that feeds pensions, that feeds school systems, that feeds tax revenues, that keeps the balance, a budget balanceable. Now, California's invented really creative ways to blow that that, that whole setup. I mean, just with the tax base being about this wide. And when Facebook's not going public, you don't have Facebook going public, the thing falls apart, right? But at the same time, I'm trying to do my part, helping a lot of these companies to become gigantic successes, not because of me. I don't have to work another day in my life. That's not about the thing. I know that sounds cliche. I don't have to work. It's not about money. It truly is not. I mean, do I want certain things I won't even mention on this call? Yeah, for sure. That's like vague, it's kind of out there. And if you get it, you get it. If you don't get it, you don't get it. Point is that what you think about is you're like, if I can help founders get from here to here, and then the end game is some company worth tens of billions of dollars and it's feeding a lot of society because that was wealth created from scratch, then you're doing society a solid. You're giving back in a material way. And so that's the mission. It's like anytime my search firm takes on a client, I always tell my partners and my employees, like, you will kill yourself for that company. You will aim as high as you can aim. You will check that person out that you're trying to hire for that entrepreneur in as many ways as you can. Try to have as extreme a conviction as you can. You're hiring somebody who's going to make a material impact, a difference on that company's outcome, and help that founder get to the next stage, unblock them somewhere. And that ethos powers our company's brand. And then that brand from just not to bore you with the details, but we use this recruiting business as a way to study companies and get really smart on them. And that's a bit of an insider trading game, and it's legal and ethical. So there's it's an unregulated space, right? So I use this recruiting company to learn a bunch about what's going on in the industry and who's winning and losing, why, what are the architectures that are winning and losing, and approaches to different problems. And so the recruiting company is a platform as a launch pad for my venture fund. So that's a little bit of some ways I look at it as a cheat code, like you might use in a video game, right? To get to the last phase of the game and win. So that's the setup. But what really drives me every single day is the idea that you're driving total wealth for the betterment of humankind at every level. And wealth, I do believe, trickles down. I really believe that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the guy's taking the risk. The guy's putting the entrepreneur who works the 80-hour weeks and puts his life savings into the business and starts to feed other families and comes along. There's a ton of stories. A friend of mine came here from Mexico and he worked at a Sonic. And I love this kind of story because this is for me, like one of the true entrepreneurial American spirit stories. He comes from Monterrey, Mexico, and with his wife, and he starts working as a Sonic, as a cook. He works his way up to the manager. And he winds up starting to make the store more money and increase profits significantly. And the guys who owned the Sonics had like 6 of them. So they took him and put him in another one as the manager, and that one made more money. He was good at it. And so he went to him and he said, hey, if I do this again at another one of the stores, can we talk about like a bonus, in the gap between the extra money that I'm making you and some sort of profit share? So the guys are like, no way, get out of here. So he kept doing it, and he decides, I want to get a Sonic franchise. So he goes to Oklahoma City. He and his wife, basically took it on, the last credit card, available cash they had. Flew to Oklahoma City. He didn't have enough money for hotel rooms, so he was going to fly there and back in the same day. And he went there and he didn't have an appointment. And he sat down, and the girl in the office was like, "Can I help you?" And he said, "Yeah, I want to talk to somebody about a franchise." He said, "Do you have an appointment?" He said, "No." So, well, you need to go back, make an appointment, and come back. And he said, "I can't. I can't afford to. I can't even afford to stay overnight." So somehow he was able to. His wife got a little extra money or something on the credit card. He was able to get a hotel room. So he spends the night. He gets up the next morning. He goes back into the Sonic headquarters office lobby. And this guy comes in and he sees him sitting there and he goes, "Hey, were you here all day yesterday?" And he goes, "Yes, I was." And he goes, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I want to talk to somebody about it getting a franchise." And he goes, "Okay, come with me." So he goes to the back, he sits down and he said, "Look, they're $100,000, but we have this program for minority-owned businesses and things like this that we can do. You come up with $35,000, then we'll sort of subsidize or finance the rest." And he's like, "I don't have $350, let alone $35,000. He goes, like, "What did you think was going to happen when you got here? Like, how are you going to buy a franchise?" And he's like, "I'll figure it out." And he said, "Okay, look, I'll put you up for the $35,000 thing, but you got to go find $35,000. And he's like, "Well, how do I know if I'm going to, get approved?" And he said, "Well, at the end of the month, we do this at this meeting." And he goes, "Well, I'll come back and pitch for myself. And he's like, you can't do that. It's not how it works. Just go get up 35 grand. I promise I'll take care of you. I'll look after you. So he goes, fine. So he's on the phone. He goes to all the aunts and uncles and friends and family and everybody, and he scrapes together about 14, 15K. And he's got that, and he's coaching his son's Little League baseball team. And he's on the phone, like, okay, nice hit, Jimmy, nice hit, Tommy, doing one of these, but he's talking to people on the phone trying to raise money. And one of the dads in the stand is listening and watching. And so at the end of practice, he comes over to him and he says, hey, he says, do you know who I am? And he said, yeah, you're Jimmy's dad. He goes, true, yes, I am Jimmy's dad, but I also own this bank over here. Then he said, and I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I was listening to you, and if you'll come see me Monday, I'll give you the rest of the money. And he was like, what? Why would you do that? And he goes, I've seen what I need to see that you're, as a hustler, as a guy who's going to go get this done, I'll give you the rest of the money. So he does. He gets his 35 grand. He gets his first franchise. And they're literally making payroll on credit cards, right? I mean, it's nights and weekends and everything that comes with owning a small business like a fast food restaurant. Long story short, he now owns 130 Sonics. He owns the real estate under 85 or 90 of them. He owns some Dunkin' Donuts, some Chicken Expresses, and he's worth a lot of money, right? And he buys, businesses. He bought a bakery, a Hispanic bakery from somebody, and in 6 months turned it around, more than doubled the revenue of a business that had been in business about 20-something years, just sort of steady as she goes. And I love that story because he came over here, worked his ass off, took a risk, borrowed money from everybody he could, bet on himself, went from the kitchen to the manager, got his first store, spent nights and weekends trying to make payroll. And he told me there were Fridays that he couldn't pay his people. And he's like, he and his wife would beg him, please don't quit. She would make dinner for him and like let him sleep at the house and just say, please don't give up. We're so close, while he got it turned around. And that's the American spirit and the wealth creation and the capitalism.
Absolutely.
That's how it starts. And people miss that part.
Most of the people we work with are immigrants. I think a lot of them are immigrants or the sons or daughters of immigrants. I mean, they've got people, I've been working with 3 or 4 Asian women who are extremely technical in the AI food chain, for example, and just geniuses and so driven. And if you look at like Frank Slootman, for example, is the name of this guy. He was the CEO of this company called Snowflake and another one called Service. Now, combined market value of the company, this guy's run $200 billion easily. And he is a self-made immigrant from the Netherlands, came over here with 50, whatever, 500, whatever the number was, very small number. Parents didn't have any money. I mean, this is so funny. The immigration thing has been so politicized in the United States in this election. And yeah, we don't need MS-13. No, we don't need Tren de Agua. No, we don't need those people.
Right.
We need to vet them. But if you look at like the future of our country, the future of our country is going to be predicated on openness to immigration because you have to grow your population and grow your economy. We know that. Birth rates are falling like this, right? And so what do? You import the immigrants that you need to import in order to create explosive companies like Google. It's created, like guys like that. And it's very interesting how driven these people are because they didn't grow up like, even on my worst day, I never had to worry other than the time that I got in a fight with my dad about a roof over my head. So I won the lottery in many ways. So I wouldn't say I was a hardscrabble example of, entrepreneurship at all. And I look at people like this guy you're describing and I'm like, I will never in 10 lifetimes be worthy of that person's company because that's serious. You go and scrape dirt under your fingernails and you do something like that, I've got all kinds of time for you. I think those people are truly the backbone of our country in the
100%.
world. And they're all over the place. You find these people in the weirdest places. People are car wash entrepreneurs out there. Like you see all these gazillionaire guys, you're like, what'd you do to get so successful? Car washes in Minnesota. What? I mean, people just gritty. I love these people. So you don't have to be some
super gritty
machine learning entrepreneur for me to think you're awesome. You could be like doing something like a laundromat, a string of laundromats or whatever. It's like this, but this is to me, that's the stuff that inspires me. People like that.
Yeah, I've got an Indian friend of mine who, a good friend, and the families all get together. They pool their cash together, and they buy an asset, a store or a gas station or whatever it may be, a car wash. They all work it. They take turns working it. And they all, split. Then they save up and they buy a second one. They buy a third one. And, I asked him one time, he bought something and it was $5 million. I'm like, how do you have $5 million? And he's like, you have no idea. He's like, and they don't live flashy. They don't, but he and his brothers and cousins and uncles and all that stuff, man, they've saved every penny that they've ever made. And they keep pouring it in and growing their businesses. And they all literally lived in like 12, 14 people lived in one house when they first got here, in a rental house, pulled their cash together and all went and worked jobs to save up their money so they could buy their first asset. And I'm like, that's how it, that's the story. And in my own little world, when you think about all the people that get better lives for that, right? Family members that come over and or employees that benefit from this. In my own little world, that ripple effect I saw, and this is the day that it hit me in the whole longevity space, was I was at a restaurant in Houston, and a patient of ours, a client of mine, and his wife and his granddaughter were at this table. And I hadn't met the granddaughter, but I know, and he's older. He was 87, maybe, healthy, good, had a hip problem, got an infection, had a pretty good scare there for a while. But we treated him, he bounced back, never, sort of felt better kind of moment. And I saw him and I went by and I said hello. And he said, this is the man, Greg, who helped Pawpaw get better. And she looked at me and she said, thank you for giving me my Pawpaw back, or something like this. Now I'm a man who will cry. I don't care.
Yeah,
and I'm standing there going, okay. And there's been a few moments like that in this game where I see I'm not helping somebody get out of pain or helping somebody, I'm actually helping someone in this ripple effect. And probably the best one, the one I like the most, or I like them all, but there's a veteran and he's Green Beret, 20 years in the military, sniper. I mean, just, and I'm a 12-year-old boy like that at that point when I'm meeting him. And he had 2 or 3 TBIs and, some concussive stuff and a lot of bad ortho stuff. And I said, look, you don't know me. I heard him speak at this event that I was at. I said, but I have this clinic and I think we can help you with the TBIs and some of the ortho stuff. And it's for the work that you've done in the service, bring, a couple of your guys and come down to the clinic, and it's on us. So I said, you can ask around here at the event. People know who I am. I'm not crazy. I'm not some whack job. So he trusted me and said, okay. And then his wife called me up, and they're good friends of mine now. And they kind of love when I tell this story, but they come down, they come to the clinic, we help them out. Now, they are in the anti-human trafficking business and also in the disaster relief business. They've been in North Carolina. They've been on the news and on Dr. Phil's show. It's aerial recovery. I'll just say it.
Amazing.
And they're all over the news, and they're just insanely good humans. But he said, he looked at me and he goes, why are you doing this for us? And I said, honestly, this is why. And there's some selfishness to it. If I can help you keep doing the things you do, you're going to go out there and impact so many lives of people I'll never know and don't need to know or never meet, don't need to meet. But when you pull a kid out of rubble, or you rescue an 11-day-old baby off, of a house that's flooding in North Carolina, or go into Turkey and stop human trafficking and stuff like that, the ripple effect of me helping you, and I'm no hero in this story, to be sure, right? I'm just a guy who helped this guy get a little bit better so he can go do the things he is really badass at doing.
Yes.
And help all these other people. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. That's a legacy that I can, that I would love to have my DNA on, just even a little bit of it, right? Just to say, hey, we're helping these guys. And I want to do that now as much as possible, right? Because you can help so many people. And it's that ripple effect of either creating wealth or creating, moments with family members or superhumans like he is and like they are. They're going to go out and help more people. Yeah. And I said, that's why. Honestly, that's why.
Yeah. You're creating a ripple. It's amazing. That's amazing. Should we talk about your business and longevity for just a minute?
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, what's going on? I mean, as you know, I have a house 2 minutes from your new facility. And I was like, do you have any questions about, I think you asked me what my experience was with some of these approaches, things like mRNA and stem cell treatments and things like that. Did you want to talk a little bit about that today?
Yeah, if you want to dig into that, so look, and to be super fair and transparent, I like interesting people like you, right? People who have strong opinions and who have strong personalities and who are interesting and fascinating that other people are going to, because if you get on here and talk nothing about except everything about stem cells and longevity and all this stuff, people are going to get 2 episodes in and check out. And they're just be like, okay, this is kind of, it's a big promo for that. So I like hearing these relatable stories of people who can go, huh, because there's somebody out there who heard what you said. They'd heard one thing that you said or 5 things that you said. They're like, I'm going to put that, I'm going to, steal that a little bit, right? I'm going to take a little piece of that and try to see if I can deploy it in my life. That's honestly the goal, is the idea of it's the intersection of science and the why. Because if you don't have, I'm a huge believer, if you don't have your why, and even if you don't have to have it, but you should be looking for it. You should be trying to figure out what your why in life is. Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, I had this dinner the other night with a guy who's an entrepreneur in longevity, and he was grilling me on the details of why I like stem cells and why I like this, why I like that. And I said, look, I'm not going to try to present any of my knowledge as fact-based or, I'm not a medically trained person. But this is why I was excited to get on the show today. Not only to see you, as I actually just a huge fan personally and professionally, gigantic respect. As you know,
Same.
I flew to Costa Rica for your facility.
Yep.
Plasmapheresis, did stem cell treatment, and then I've gotten into regular routine regimen of stem cell infusions. And I know that my doctor is going to be getting his cells from your clinic, which is great. So what I want to quickly share is a very personal experience that's profoundly important in my life. It goes back to that vaccine vignette around my wife. She was clotting, and our U.S. doctor did not know why. And our Mexican doctor said, I think you need to go check your D-dimer level. So go do a blood test to check your D-dimer level. Nobody else had even thought about that. In all of these medical resources we have in the United States, nobody else even thought of that. She goes and goes to get blood tests, the rep results, and they were like 50 times the normal limit. So the guy said, you're clotting. That's where your headaches are coming from. And he said, you are on the verge of probably potentially dying. You need to do this, and then you need to take these medicines. So we actually had to use some Western medicines to calm down the inflammation and the clotting and all this other stuff and give her a fighting chance. We did. And she obviously lived. And so we got through that knothole. But what happened after that was a systemic autoimmune problem that caused incredibly chronic pain in her shoulder, where she just existing on planet Earth without wanting to jump off a bridge was like a daily practice for her, and it inspired the hell out of me because she really functioned. She helped me raise my kids and run my business. And
how long was she living like this?
Oh, she's 4 years in now, and it's only now on the downslope. And here's why: because she does regular stem cell treatments and also uses mRNA infusions to calm her immunity system down and regulate it. And so what's interesting is you can't even get these treatments in the United States. So we have to do them in Mexico. So people go, what do you mean you're going down to Mexico to get your treatments? And Americans don't have any idea. Japan, Europe, medical tourism is exploding. You go to Costa Rica, you go to Mexico. Mexico's probably going to own alternative medicine. A good friend of mine, he's a Mexican commercial fisherman. He had cancer of 2 or 3 organs that we would have thought is probably fatal. Guy's maybe 45 years old. Goes to Mexico City. He's not a wealthy man. Cured, healthy as a horse. I don't know what he did. I still have got to I haven't gotten around to saying, hey, exactly how did you survive? Because he's just healthy as a horse now. He was really sick. And I think Mexico is going to explode because it's so close, obviously, to the United States. And, if you look at Canada, you can't even go there and get an x-ray. God love him. Yeah. And so free healthcare isn't what it's cracked up to be, as you know. But you can go to Mexico and get these treatments for a very reasonable cost. And what it's done for me is it's given me systemic power, systemic energy levels that I don't have to caffeinate myself. I take 1 cup of coffee in the morning, then I can go out and power all day long. That includes insane workouts. I can go out and surf for 2 hours and 3 hours in the morning at dawn, burn 2,000 calories, come back, power all day long, no drop off in energy. And I feel like I'm 25.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. So I attribute that to stem cells. I've not been sick in over a year. My wife hasn't been sick in 2 years because of this mRNA stuff. So the things you're working on right now, what I'm excited about is I want all Americans to understand there is a plan B. There's an alternative. And the plan B should be, in my mind, the plan A, which is these are naturally occurring things, compounds, right? Cells that you can't patent. A drug company can't tell you that it's not good for you. You have to do your own research on it, make sure you're getting a good supplier that's going to give you cells that haven't been, spoiled or damaged or whatever. And I believe people need to educate themselves, and you got to do the blood panel so you don't feed the tumor with the stem cell, all the things you have to do. You have to be diligent about this stuff, but this stuff is available. And I see a lot of sick Americans, or I see a lot of people aging prematurely. And I'm 54, and so, or almost 54, I'll be 54 in a few months. I see people at my age that look like they're in their 70s. And I'm like, why don't you get on this right now? And all my friends in their 40s, I keep saying to anybody who'll sit still, listen, you should be working on longevity now. So you're just slowing down. Your curve isn't quite as steep. That's the whole game. You're just going to live better, longer. You don't necessarily know if you're going to stave off some disease or you're going to do this or that. There's no magic bullet. It's just about, can you lower the trajectory of aging, slow its roll, and give yourself a better chance to live on this beautiful planet that we were given by whatever creator you define, and enjoy your life and your kids and your loved ones and your friends and giving back and whatever, your dogs. I'm passionate about that. And I want to say to you on this podcast, I genuinely, very deeply respect and appreciate what you're doing, because I think pioneers like you, entrepreneurs like you, are creating businesses like this to bring these alternative modalities to people at a reasonable cost and in beautiful facilities. Because, people don't want to go to some janky spot and say, oh, okay, sure, stick a needle in my arm. They want to know that they're being handled by professionals. And so somebody like you with our shit together, with a very highly professional staff, well-trained, facilities were flawless. I could have eaten off the floors in Costa Rica. And I know you're this one, and I'm more excited about the one in Palmilla because it's so close.
It's the close.
I can fly 2.5 hours away or 3 hours away and get healthy. It's so, like I've got all these people that are now getting really excited about this medical tourism opportunity in Baja California that are, I believe very deeply, are going to live better lives because of what you're doing. So I just wanted to say that you are not a self-personal person. I knew you weren't going to go there today. I wanted to go there because if anybody's watching this, they don't get that out of this conversation. That would be a mistake. That would be a miss on my part. It's my small way of giving back, to just really passionately encourage people, anybody who's watching this, to really look into this and not read the Google results about what can go wrong. You got to look at how this can change your life and your ability to really squeeze all the juices out of life that you can until it's over.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, no, I mean, it's anybody who sort of has followed some of the stuff that I've done. Costa Rica was the launching pad in 21. Cabo is going to 10x right. It's just you've seen it. I mean, it's just bigger and bolder and more ambitious and just sort of better in a lot of ways. But I will say this to your point. Costa Rica's a phenomenal country, and a lot of Americans are sort of they don't understand the idea that those doctors get health. They go to medical school in their countries. They typically go to Europe and study in some specialty, and then they wind up in the U.S. at a residency or fellowship of some kind. Then they wind up back in their country. I will tell you, there is a doctor in Costa Rica that if one of my sons got sick, I would send him to him first.
Yes.
Right? That's how much respect I have for him.
Yeah.
And Mexico is the same way, right? These doctors are so well educated and they're so well trained. And they have this world view that's not nearly as myopic as some of the physicians who are just trained in the U.S. They stay in the U.S. and they
less formulaic,
way less formulaic. Yeah,
far more expensive. They're thinking their educational construct is way more expensive.
And I'll be honest, the way they think about patient care is just different too. It's just a different ethos. It's a different thing altogether. Another thing that you said, free healthcare. One of my favorite quotes about that is PJ O'Rourke, who said, "If you think healthcare is expensive now, wait till it's free," right? Which is one of my favorites. And then aging, slow this thing down. Yeah, I mean, it's like we're reading from the same playbook. So the definition of aging that I like is the functional decline of a living organism over a period of time. And you hear a lot of people talking about this period of time part. I even put it on the intake. If you could live to 150, why would you want to? And what would you do different? It's not the period of time part. It's the functional decline part that we have to focus on. And that's where I think the medicine is now. And for anybody who's sort of listening is, why is this explosion in longevity and everything happen? Yes, you have a bunch of very well-known media personalities out there talking about living to 150 or 180 and all this. And there's a lot of, I'll call it hype, right? Just there's a lot of media hype around it. Here's why. First of all, the functional decline part is where we have to focus. If you can't slow the reversal or reverse the functional decline, the aging part of this, then the period of time part doesn't matter. Because nobody's signing up for it, and it's probably not going to happen anyway. And we functionally decline in our cognition, and our immune function, and our vascular function, and our sexual wellness, and our aesthetics. These are the major systems where we start to functionally decline. And if we can't address that by slowing it and or possibly reversing it, then we don't even need to talk about the period of time part. And that's where cellular medicine has made great strides, but not in and of it, or not standalone. These are puzzle pieces. You need good lifestyle, like we've been talking about. You need to be, you need to have good fitness. You need to manage your stress. You need to eat well. You need to sleep well. You need to do all the things that we've always been told. And when you combine them with some of the new science that's coming out, we can now start to see measurable impact that is being created. And here's one of the reasons longevity is such a big hot topic. You can't swing a dead cat without hearing about it. Is in 2007, Professor Yamanaka discovered the Yamanaka factors, right, in Japan. In 2012, he was nominated for the Nobel Prize and won it in 2013, I think it was, for the Yamanaka factors. That's not that long ago. That's 11 years ago, right? And the Yamanaka factors, for anybody listening, he identified 4 genes, 4 transcription factors by taking a human skin cell and reversing its age all the way back to an embryonic-like stem cell. So think frog to the tadpole, right? And it blew everybody's mind. And he won the Nobel Prize in 6 years, 7 years, as well he should. It was a major breakthrough. And then you had epigenetic clocks in 2013, and you had epigenetic reprogramming is on the horizon right now that's coming down the pike. You had all of these breakthroughs that happened in this compressed time window. And in 2021, the WHO formally recognizes aging as a disease. And whether you think it is or it isn't doesn't matter. It's not the point. It's an old debate for a couple of hundred years. We've been talking about, is aging a disease? Because the idea is if it is, you could be cured and or treated. And it doesn't matter if you think it is or it isn't, to my way of thinking, because the guys who are sitting around thinking, maybe that is a disease, are the ones who are going to create the breakthrough. That's where innovation occurs. Innovation happens when a guy doesn't go, oh, so it's not just this inevitable decline into the end and we're just going to die at 78 to 80, but it's a disease that might be curable, if not curable, treatable. And that's where your breakthrough comes. And so that's, to me, the significance of an organization like the World Health Organization saying, yes, we think aging is a disease. So that's why you're seeing all of this innovation and this scientific advancement in this compressed window in the last 10 to 15 years, because we've had lots of breakthroughs in diagnostics, the epigenetic clocks coming out, all the wearables that we can, from CGMs to Oura rings to you name it. We can track all these different biomarkers and metrics in our bodies now and be able to come in and mitigate either, autoimmune conditions or chronic disease of types, and or just be preventative and put us in a better microenvironment to age in a more graceful and healthy way. And in this day and age, based on what I just talked about in the compressed time window, imagine buying an extra 5 or 10 years right now of healthy, youthful function, right, of grace and vitality. Imagine that. What's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years? Because look at what just happened in the last 10 to 15. And we're just getting started. You said the word nascent earlier. This is a nascent, young industry that is exploding with a ton of wealth and capital being poured into it, with the brightest minds in the world. Altos Labs, I mean, they hired Professor Yamanaka. They've got Horvath, who created the epigenetic clock, and they have $3 billion in a war chest to go out and change the way the world experiences the disease of aging. I mean, that's why this is so cool. And it's a really cool thing to be a part of.
Remember that song Dust in the Wind by Kansas?
Yeah, of course.
I love playing that song on my guitar.
On the guitar.
And I'll tell you, because it's so poignant. There's the line that says, all your money won't another minute buy. And I'm like, really? That's not really the case anymore. Now, the question that I have is like, at what point it's already, you can tell the costs of stem cells are already very accessible to what I would call a middle-class buyer. You don't have to have drive Ferrari to get access to stem cell. And you don't have to do 200 million cell, infusions every time, right? I just don't believe that's
Right.
even,
More is not always better.
yeah, exactly. You need to pace it. I mean, we could go into that, but I do believe that as the world's decided it doesn't want to have as many children as it used to, right? We have a population crisis here in the United States. We have a population crisis in China. If you think about, there's been population. The reason that Japan's economy has really grown in 30 years, right, is because the population went like this and then went like that, and then kind of like that. So if you go, okay, well, if our populations are growing, then we need vitality to bridge the gap. So that actually, if you think about the ancillary benefits to society of a population that might in its 70s be twice as productive, because nobody really wants to retire anymore, right? You're not going to sit on your couch and watch reruns of Sanford and Sons all day long. What are you going to do? It's like, you're going to be active, but you're going to want to work. Maybe you work on your own schedule. Maybe you work half time. You're contributing to the economy. So there's like, when women decided to really join the economy, or they were allowed to in a lot of different places, right? All of a sudden you could see GDP growth pop. So that was interesting. Okay, well, they don't need to stay at home. We should bring them into the workforce, and GDP exploded in countries that actually embraced women in the workforce. Now let's take it another step. Elderly people.
Yeah.
Coming back in the workforce or staying in the workforce longer, bridging the gap that we're going to have from a productivity point of view by a declining global birth rate. So, if you look at India and some of these other developing economies, you still see gigantic populations, right? But at the same time, you look at actual birth rates.
They're on the decline.
They're on the decline. So it's like a human thing. It's like humans have decided to stop having 5, 6, 7, 8 children, and they're having 1 or 2. If that's going to be the case, this stuff is going to be an existentially important component to the longevity of the economic system that drives the world. And I think that's actually, there's a case to be made that all this stuff is a major catalyst to a completely new setup where you have men and women and older people all contributing to the global economic system in a more healthy way.
This is almost bringing this conversation full circle into this whole, sick care that we talked about in the early part of the conversation to now. I call it an aging crisis. So by 2030, 1 in 6 people in the U.S. will be over the age of 60. That's never happened before, that percentage of the population.
Yeah.
By 2050, 2.1 billion people on the planet will be over the age of 60, which has also never happened before. So if you take that large of a percentage of the population and they're over the age of 60, we know what happens in our current model.
Yeah.
Healthcare needs become a lot more complex, 60, 65 years of age. We're going to put a bigger burden on our healthcare resources, bigger burden on our financial resources, bigger burden on the family units. You're going to see all this. So we absolutely have to start aging better. We just do. That's your whole point, right?
Talking about a global, I don't want to be hyperbolic here. My worldview is actually very optimistic, generally speaking. I have a healthy degree of pessimism. You can't read the Wall Street Journal or anything, The Economist or whatever, without being like, damn, that could go sideways. But you got to believe that we'll find a way. You got to believe in human innovation and human spirit and whatever. Otherwise, what are we doing here? But I do believe that there is a very real scenario where the world as we know it collapses because of demographics. And if we're not going to produce children, we've got to live longer. Like we're saying, I really believe this is going to unlock a big choke point in world economic growth, which as we know, I mean, you can even look at climate change, for example, for 1 second. Climate change, think about what happens. Your energy intensity as you're living in poverty is way higher if you're in Brazil in some forest, right? And you're burning trees for fuel. And you move up the food chain, your energy intensity actually per capita starts to drop. And so that's, so think about advancing the global economy. You have to do that in order to lift people out of poverty and give them, some chance of a worthwhile life on Earth. And so if we're going to do that, we need a global economy that continues to grow over time. It's crazy naive to say, it's okay if it stagnates and that shouldn't drive everybody's thinking. But the reality is, if you stop creating opportunities for people, the machine stops. And then what happens is darkness. So longevity in my mind is the third dimension. It's the third estate, let's call it. It's women in the workforce. So it's obviously men being productive, women in the workforce, elderly people. We're going to be contributing longer.
Yes.
Critical.
Well, at the same time, and this is way more your world than mine, but at the same time that we are sort of running out of money in a lot of these programs, right? In a lot of these areas that I think, with Social Security and some other things. So elderly people are going to be in the workplace longer. We have to make sure that we age better. And I believe the only way to do that is to start taking a lot more ownership and accountability for it earlier in the curve, right? Quit waiting until we get into our 60s and say, oh shit, I better do something about this. And now you're in your 70s and you're like, damn, it's too late. Now I'm on medications and I'm just in all this chronic age-related disease. And then it's just an ugly little, spiral to the end. That's got to stop, right? And I think that's where we're headed. And I think that's where
it won't stop in the United States until this unholy alliance between the obscene drug lobby and the money flows to our quote unquote elected leaders, I say in quotations, as if these people lead anything on either side of the aisle. They're leading themselves back into office and into triple, the 9-figure millionaires club. But I digress. The thing that really bothers me immensely is the logjam of innovation against longevity in the United States because we are so dependent on Western medicine and those approaches to longevity. There's no Western medicine longevity drug that I know of. You might be cured of, some illness, their cell therapy or something like that, Genentech or whatever might solve the drug discovery process has become very interesting. There's a lot of excitement there. I'm very optimistic that the drug industry will continue to innovate to your earlier point. We owe a great deal of gratitude to the Mercks of the world for solving certain ailments, obviously. But if we don't get into unlocking longevity in the United States, we're going to suffer an economic collapse in the next 20 to 30 years. I really believe that. And so we've got to put our population needs to put a great deal of more pressure on elected officials to rein in the FDA or get the FDA to change its worldview or just say, you know what, we're going to operate outside the FDA in unregulated space because there's a lot of people who can actually afford, let's say the fast food worker in Louisiana, right? That guy's not going to get on a plane and come down to Cabo and go to Colel. I mean, they're not going to be able to afford it. So
Right.
How do we make this stuff affordable to the masses so that everybody can contribute to this economy? It can't just be wealthy people or even middle-class people have to figure out a way to make this stuff affordable to the masses. That's, to me, an urgent need. And I just don't think a lot of people are even thinking about the strangulation of innovation of naturally occurring modalities by the existing U.S. healthcare system.
They're not.
Yeah,
We're not.
one last vignette I'll share with you. I don't want to just be, pedantic here, but I went to see my orthopedic surgeon, the same guy who rebuilt my shoulder and did a brilliant job about getting my knee done with some of this. It's effectively a collagen equivalent that they can grow in your knee. And so he was like, look, there's not enough medical evidence that this stuff's working. I said, well, what's the downside? He's like, well, just that it might not work. I said, well, why don't we do it? Because if it's not going to kill me or, hobble me, then why don't we just try it? And he was like, his whole mindset was fear-based, cover your ass based, worrying about getting sued. And so he was like, just mentally, and this guy's a brilliant guy, brilliant musician on the side. He's like well-educated guy, incredible surgeon. He just could not expand his mind to think about an alternative medicine that hadn't been vetted out for 25 years with millions of peer-reviewed studies and what have you. And I was like, I'm talking to the wrong guy. I got to go. So that's what I think Americans need to do is really start paying attention to this opportunity. It's an opportunity. And then saying, what are the chokeholds between me and accessing this opportunity to live better? And they need to really focus on it. Like, this isn't just something that rich people should be navel-gazing about longevity and Jennifer Aniston looking better in her 60s or whatever. It's not about that.
No,
it's
not.
much broader mission.
No, the democratization of these kinds of technologies will happen, right? And we've seen it before. I think you're seeing it in the space industry right now, where the wealthy and the uber wealthy pave the way for a lot of these things, to the early innovation to happen, right? It's got to get paid somehow.
That's right.
Right, exactly. They underwrite it.
The early Tesla Roadster underwrote the the S model, and then that unlocked the whole ED thing.
I mean,
Yeah.
look, Axiom Space is doing a great job right now of in the privatization of space. I've had a couple of people that I know. Try to be careful about that. They may be public, but anyway, that we're on those missions, and one's a private citizen that paid to go, and it turns out if you've got an extra 65, 75, 80 million bucks burning a hole in your pocket, you can go spend 10 days on the space station, right? So any little kid that ever grew up dreaming of being an astronaut, that just didn't get into the astronaut program or didn't pursue that path, if you become wealthy enough, you can go. And I was telling my sons, at some point in your lifetime, you'll probably be able to go to space.
Yeah.
For,
10,000 bucks.
maybe a couple hundred. I mean,
yeah.
Which is still a lot of money, but not a lot of money next to, 65, 70 million. So we see it a lot. And I think the same thing is going to happen here. We're going to see the democratization of this, make it more accessible to
But
more
only
and more
the
people.
regulators get on board.
But
The bureaucrats have to embrace this stuff. The politicians have to embrace this stuff. Otherwise,
didn't we have
locals will strangle it.
Didn't we have a candidate this election cycle that was in favor of banning the pharma ads on television? And I don't want to get into politics, but I mean, I think we're one of 2 countries in the world that allow drug companies to advertise on television.
Market, yeah.
Yeah, and market on television, I'm not mistaken.
Out of the cigarette industry, I must be honest. I mean, it's crazy.
I mean, it's kind of wild. Hey, as we start to wrap up and bring this back, I want to kind of bring it back to, Andy Price, the man. So I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions. What are you reading? I know you mentioned you're a voracious reader. What are you reading right now? Or what did you just read?
I'm obsessed with the financial press right now. I'm trying to make sense of a very complex economy that doesn't really make any sense. For the first time, you look how formulaic the system was for the last millennia. And if you look at today, nothing makes any sense. So I'm doing no recreational reading now. I'm just inhaling everything I can in the financial press to try to make sense of where this economy is going to go and how to play it.
Did you read
out of a vibrating moment, right, where the GDP was has looked, let's say, artificially better than it is, and the guy on the ground is suffering, right, and it has been for a while. What happens over the next couple of years? And that's what I'm doing. Literally no recreational reading right now.
Got it. What did you ever read Creature from Jekyll Island?
No.
Read that.
I will.
It's not recreational in the sense. So the creature is the Federal Reserve, and Jekyll Island is where it was birthed, with a couple of very famous last names who got on a coach in the middle of the night out of New Jersey. So, Mellon, Carnegie, Rockefeller.
They made a movie about this.
I'm telling you right now, order the book on wherever you get your books. The Creature from Jekyll Island. If you're obsessed with the financial press right now, that's a phenomenal read, because it's all about the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal or a reserve. So that's the first question. Second question, you mentioned in the intake both poetic and musical, and you mentioned you play the guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you grow up playing?
No. I got inspired to get into. I was in a band for a while. I was a singer. I was in a band for 10 years. It's like a dad band. We played out at times, but
love it.
My grandfather was a pretty famous, semi-famous jazz musician in Ernie Heckscher band, which is pretty well known. And then, of course, my wife is this prolific musician, and I'm like, I can't be all 3 of my children are musical.
Yeah.
2 of them sing and play.
Yeah.
Really well. And I think my wife is a genius musically. So I'm inspired to just kind of follow along.
Yeah. Be a part of the hootenanny when it breaks out.
Therapy. I would say it's very good therapy.
It is good therapy. My son, when he started playing, I had a guitar and I was noodling around and I was showing him some things, and he was young when we started. And within a few months, 6 months, he was showing me things on the guitar. Now this kid's probably 10 at the time. And I got mad at my guitar. I put it in the corner for a year and wouldn't even look at it, because I was like, I'll never have that. It was clear that this, but it's
it
one of those
humbles
things.
You can get humbled in a hurry. Having a family member who's a superstar and you're kind of just grinding around.
This kid, but to your point, it's a lot of fun. We sit and play when we get together, and, I just kind of play some rhythm and he'll play lead and do all this stuff. But he's insanely talented, right? Berkeley and London College of Music. I mean, the kid is, and I think he plays 8 or 9 instruments. But that's, the music part. I like to write. I've been a writer. I went to NYU and film school. I always loved being a storyteller and writing. And I know that that's one of the outlets for me that, man, it's just, there's more therapy there. For some reason, I like writing on airplanes. I spend a lot of time on airplanes. So it's a great place to just sort of isolate away for a little while, put on headphones and write. You mentioned being poetic. More about that.
I mean, I've written a bunch of songs.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I used to write a lot of poetry. I never shared it with anybody. I wrote 100 poems. I don't know if any of them were any good. They were probably terrible.
Doesn't matter. I know. I did unearth a few that I had written like in high school, and I like slammed the book shut and hid it in a bottom drawer so nobody would ever be able to discover it because I thought they were that bad, right? There was
to me, like, I always thought I always identified as like a warrior poet.
Yeah.
You had to have a different side of yourself, like a feminine side, whatever you want to call it, like a part of yourself that was like deeply vulnerable and embrace that vulnerability as you went out to try to be a dragon slayer and whatever you were trying to do. And I was a really sensitive, nerdy little kid, very nerdy. And I was nerdy all the way into high school and probably even past that. And didn't relate to anybody. It was a good, so I would read and then write and just have this sort of internal therapy. That was sort of how I got through my childhood.
So 3 things, if you want anyone listening to this to remember, 3 takeaways as we start to wrap up here, as we do wrap up. It can be on anything, Andy. I mean, on longevity, on discipline, on success, on failure, on love, on finance, romance. It doesn't matter. But just 3 things, nuggets of wisdom that you would want someone to walk away from and go, man, I heard the 3 coolest things on this podcast.
I would say the first thing is don't settle in any aspect of your life. You don't have to. But learn how to hug yourself, because you're never going to be that 6'4" guy on the other street corner that's the Uber man, right? Like, it's like life is a journey of seeking and reaching and striving, right? Give yourself a break. And then the third thing is give back. I know that sounds super cliche, but man, the more I've given back and more I've been charitable, the more money I've made, the more success I've had. I think humility is its own kind of drug. And the older, and it's, again, so cliche, but truly, most people that I know have been really successful. They're like kind of over themselves by that point. They're like, it's not like they think they're cool. That's what people think. Oh, you're a rich guy, then think you're cooler than everybody. No, the more successful you are, the more you don't feel you deserve it. And so you kind of feel like, well, I've got to give back and I've got to be charitable and I need to be thinking about, this morning I found out about this dog that's being neglected. And I'm hell-bent on figuring out how to save this dog. And it's like giving me purpose all day long to figure out how to take care of this dog. I can't. I already have 3 dogs. I can't afford. My wife will literally kill me. So those are the 3 things I'd say that people should, that I'd like to pass on to people. It's really, don't settle. Don't hate yourself when you're not perfect, because you're not going to ever be perfect ever. And then get back.
Yeah, but you said it better. You said it, don't give yourself a hug.
Yeah,
which I love that, right? Yeah, that be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
I love that one a lot. I love all 3 of those. And don't apologize for not settling either, right? Because you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. And sometimes people think, don't settle. Well, like, I don't know. There's this inherent thing that when it came to mind was like, apologizing for, well, I'm not going to settle. I'm not going to, and started to defend yourself. No, you don't have to. You don't have to apologize.
The fourth one, which would be learn how to laugh from the gut at yourself. Not just laugh or chuckle, a little chuckle. It's a gut laugh at yourself, because it's like, if you take yourself too seriously, there's a lot of cortisol involved in that, a lot of disappointment, a lot of like imposter syndrome that overtakes your psyche and then kind of buries you. You can live with your imposter syndrome and laugh about it all day long and be your worst critic and still give yourself a hug. It's all good. Just don't look for the ribbon when you suck.
And I also have to say too, you don't have to be uber wealthy and uber successful to give back. We can all give back in our own ways.
Give your
right?
time.
Yeah, my time. Yeah, that's the thing that I was always, when the boys were growing up, I would tell them, we're going to go down and we're going to do this. Because yes, we can donate. Yes, we could give to the church or to the homeless shelter or to the whatever. But when you go down and give your time, that's giving back in a way that, and we had some of the most incredible interactions and experiences with people that you would not have otherwise spoken to or met in these conversations. It was fabulous, and it was all in the whole giving back. And there were times that only thing we could give was time, right? We didn't have anything else to give. So I think it's important to note that too.
It feeds the soul. It really
It
does.
really does. There's nothing makes you feel better than, helping another person. It really doesn't. Enough, and that sounds cliche too, but it's true.
No one's going to give you a rat's ass what your balance sheet looks like when you die. It's what did you do
Yeah.
for other people? That's what I remember.
The impact that you made. Andy, I knew it was going to be awesome. It was just over the top, nailed it, delivered. Thank you so much.
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one for a while. So
Thank you
we've got some editing to do and all of that, but I'll be sure to we send out this whole little thing, like here it is, and here's some clips, and here's all this stuff. So
I'm honored to know you. I'm honored to be on this show. I really appreciate you taking the time to get in my head, and I appreciate the opportunity to share.
The honor's mine. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you soon in
Very
Cabo.
soon.
Yeah. Are you going to Welcome Back?
I don't think so. I don't.
No.
Not sure.
On the 29th?
She would know.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll check. But I'll see you soon, I'm sure.
You got it. Take
Thank
care,
you.
sir. Bye-bye.
Yep.